So I want to now talk about a specific type of legal entity. It's called the cooperative. And just to frame it, here's just a thought experiment. Where would you rather get your food? We have one choice here in the community. It's the 99-cent store. And we have another choice that someone already mentioned, which is Mandela Foods. And that's a cooperative. It's a worker-owned cooperative. And I think it's clear why I am asking the question, but I want to go deeper into why cooperatives are so exciting and why we at the East Bay Community Law Center and why SELC work so much with cooperatives and are trying to push this as an alternative economic model for starting food justice enterprises. So we should start with what exists right now. And for the most part, the food industry is dominated by traditional corporations like Kraft. And a traditional corporation features a shareholder model. And in the shareholder model, you have that guy at the top of the screen with the top hat. He's a shareholder, and he's the person who owns the corporation. He gets all the power in terms of voting. He gets the profits based off of the corporation's activities, and his shares are a form of ownership. But there's so many other people who are touched by corporations and who are involved with the activities of corporations, including the workers, the consumers, and the producers and suppliers and community members. And yet, in this traditional model, they don't have equity or ownership traditionally, or power, or voice in how the corporation is run. And a cooperative allows you to change that framework. It allows you to involve these other players in the business activities of the cooperative. So to recap, in the traditional corporation, control is based on who's the boss and who's got the biggest piece of the pie based on how many shares you own. But in a cooperative, it's based on membership. So if you are a member of the cooperative, you have one vote, just like everybody else who's a member in the cooperative. And it's a radical idea, but it works. I'm sure some of you are familiar with cooperatives in the community. Beyond Mandela Foods, any of your credit unions that you're part of, those are cooperatives. They're called financial cooperatives. REI is a very large consumer cooperative that's very successful. And there's a bunch of agricultural cooperatives that exist in California. And in fact, there are 29,000 cooperatives in the United States. So it's a huge industry and very powerful industry, or a grouping of business models. And in the co-op, unlike in the traditional corporation model, the cooperative shares ownership. So power is distributed amongst the members according to one member, one vote. Profits are not distributed to shareholders based on how much they own, but rather based on how much they contribute to the cooperative or how much they use. So I'll give you an example of that in a second. And finally, equity or ownership of the cooperative is often limited. So the cooperative is not a get-rich-quick scheme. It's not something it's not a share that you flip or you trade in order to make a profit off of. It's rather, it gives you a limited stake in the venture, but often you cannot take advantage of selling it for a huge profit. The cooperative limits how much profit you can get off of selling your membership. Or the cooperative might even limit whether you can sell your membership or whether you need to another person, whether you have to actually sell it back to the cooperative itself. And to give you an example of cooperatives that are in our community, that are growing in the United States right now, not in West Oakland, but in Cleveland, there's a group of cooperatives called the Evergreen Cooperatives that have just formed. And they're in the food space. They've just launched a 14-acre greenhouse, urban greenhouse, that's producing herbs and lettuce and greens for use by very large institutions in Cleveland. And it's a radical new model of bringing worker-owned businesses that are serving community-based institutions. And I just say that because I think there's a lot of potential for creating those types of initiatives right here in Oakland and in the Bay Area. So there's many different types of cooperatives. I want to run through 3 different types. So going back to the shareholder picture, the guy at the top is the guy who owns everything, but at the bottom there was workers, consumers, and producers. And in the co-op, we've taken out the guy at the top. There is no shareholder anymore. Rather, we've given memberships to the people at the bottom of that picture. So here's the first one. This is the worker co-op. Some examples in our community are Arizmendi Bakeries, who've donated food today, and Mandela Foods Cooperative. In a worker co-op, the workers are the members. They have the governing rights over the cooperative, but they also share in the profits based on how much did they contribute their labor to the cooperative. And that labor is usually measured by the number of hours you worked or the wages you've earned, and that's how profits are distributed back. It's not based on how much each worker owns in the cooperative, because in fact they all own the same share. Another type is a consumer cooperative. So moving around to the next person that was left out of the traditional shareholder model. This is a type of co-op that's, many of you might be members of consumer co-ops. A lot of food co-ops are consumer co-ops. REI is a consumer co-op. And in this model, the consumer is the member, and the consumers vote for the board of directors of the cooperative. And the board of directors then appoints the officers, the executive management team that runs the cooperative. And the consumers actually share in the profits of the cooperative based on how much they consumed. So how much did they spend at the cooperative in the past year? That's how profits are decided. And finally, the last person who is left out is the producer. And these are traditionally what we think of as agricultural cooperatives. Organic Valley is an example of producer cooperative. And in the producer cooperative, it's the same principle of one member, one vote, but the profits or patronage are distributed to the producers based on how much they produced for the cooperative's use. And the cooperative is then selling those products. So those are 3 different types of cooperatives that are in our community and are great models for how to organize a food business. So let's play a game. We have a bread cooperative. What type of cooperative is this? Oh, I haven't told you anything about it yet, so you don't know. So it's a bread cooperative. If it was a worker co-op, what would this mean? Well, one example of a worker co-op bread cooperative is where the members are the worker owners of the bakery. Arizmendi is a type of bread cooperative, worker bread cooperative. But if it was a producer co-op, you could imagine that each member was actually an independent bread making business, and the producer co-op aggregated all of their products and sold it to the market. And finally, if it was a consumer co-op, the members are you and me, the people who go to the bakery, and we go and buy bread. That would be a bread consumer co-op. So that's just an example of how you can take one industry, bread, and change it across 3 different types of co-op models. There are some tax benefits to the cooperative model. The IRS actually has a whole separate category of taxation for cooperatives. And this is based on the idea that cooperatives are not traditional for-profit corporations. They're actually mutual benefit, mutual aid societies in which the members come together to support one another, and the purpose of the cooperative is to support the members as patrons or users of the cooperative. So when a cooperative distributes profits, or what we call patronage in the cooperative sense, back to the members, that patronage distribution is actually a tax-deductible distribution to the cooperative. And that's different because in the traditional corporation setting, those distributions of profits are called dividends, and they're not tax-deductible to the corporation. They're actually taxed to the corporation at the corporation level, and then the shareholder has to include that as income at the shareholder level. So it's one minor advantage that we have is, I mean, I don't know how minor it is, it could be a big advantage, but it's important that we understand that there are these tax advantages. Finally, I want to clarify something about what do we mean when we say cooperative. Cooperatives mean a lot of different things to people. They could just be principles. It's principles that are accepted across the world called the International Cooperative Principles. And those include open membership, voluntary membership, democratic governance, a limited return on your capital investment, cooperation between different cooperatives. Those are the principles that are recognized across the world. But in the US legal system, we can think of cooperatives as a business model that's organized for the benefit of its members. So you can take a traditional business corporation and organize it cooperatively. You can take an LLC and organize it cooperatively. And finally, there's an actual legal term called the cooperative corporation in California. And when you see a business use cooperative in its name, that business has been formed as a cooperative corporation. You cannot use the word cooperative in your name unless you've been formed as this legal entity. And that's the most specific, and that's called a cooperative corporation. So cooperatives mean different things, and it's kind of a loosely used term. But I want you to understand that there is an actual thing called the cooperative. It's the cooperative corporation.